Today we would like to present on our presentation on the study career, which is production of fiber enriched bread using a watermelon rind powder. Our supervisor is Sir Iqmal Isham bin Abdul Alim, and I am Nantini Silarajan, and my other groupmates are Gugan and Shafika binti Abdul Sham. Introduction part. The introduction part consists of the agricultural waste, dietary fiber, watermelon, bread, the objective of the research, the hypothesis, and the research problem. Agricultural waste are the large volumes of solids waste resulting from the production, preparation and the consumption of fruit and the vegetable. These waste poses potential disposal and pollution problems along with the loss of valuable biomass and nutrients. There is a potential for conversion of agro waste into useful products or even as a raw material for other industries. Food industry is facing great challenges to minimizing and treating and disposing the waste along with the sustainable production. According to Shaber and Stinzing 2001, the utilization of wastes of fruit and vegetable processing as a source of functional ingredients is a promising field. Bioconversion of agriculture waste is receiving increased attention as it possible to utilize resources for conversion into useful products. Dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is the edible parts of a plant or analogous carbohydrates that are resistant to the digestion and absorption in the human small intestine with a complete or partial fermentation in the large intestine. Dietary fiber is a mixture of plant carbohydrate polymers consisting of polysaccharides and oligosaccharides as well as hemicelluloses, cellulose-resistant starch, pectin substances, inulin and gums among others. Dietary fiber has caused an interest in developing health foods such as bread are currently being used as vehicles for the dietary fiber. The key to obtaining the recommended level of fiber intake is the availability of the high quality food with the high dietary fiber content. Recently, there has been an increase in the demand for the byproducts from fruit and vegetable as a source of dietary fiber because of its high nutritional value. It belongs to the family Cucurbitaceae, whereby only pulp and juice are being consumed by the human. Watermelon biomass can be categorized as three main components, which is the flesh, seed, and the rind. The watermelon rind is nutritive and is a good potential source of the dietary fiber. According to the nickname It is Spoonful and Sunday, watermelon rind powder has been utilized for the value addition of flour-based food products. Watermelon rind relatively have a higher crude fiber, which is 17.28% compared to the banana peel that only have 12% of crude fiber, and it could be a good potential source of dietary fiber in food. Staple food that consumed in different parts of the world. It is a high energy food, very rich in carbohydrate and fat, but low in other nutrients such as protein, minerals, and vitamin. For the modern bread making, the large number of other components as additives such as yeast, sugar, milks, egg shortening, emulsifiers, and enriching ingredients are used along of the growth of the baking process. The application of the dietary fiber in making helps to improve the characteristic of the bread, such as the water holding capacity of the dietary fiber prevents the bread from stalling, and which could extend the shelf life of the product and increase its fiber content. The research problem, objective, and the hypothesis. The research problem is the high fiber content in the fruit waste and the less research focusing on the flavor content of the fruit waste. The objective of the research is to determine the level of awareness of the respondents toward the agriculture waste as a functional food and to determine the physical characteristic of fiber enriched bread using watermelon rind powder with a different formulation and to determine the chemical characteristic of the fiber enriched bread using watermelon rind powder with different formulation. The hypothesis of the research is there is a significant difference on the physical and the chemical characteristics between the watermelon rind powder bread compared to the control bread. Another hypothesis is there is no significant difference on the acceptability of bread produced.
Hello, I am Shafika. Today I want to present about literature review and methodology. For the literature review, there are some points that can be explained, which is agriculture waste, nutrient content of watermelon, dietary fiber and bread. First, I want to explain about agriculture waste. Agriculture waste is byproduct agriculture, which is straw, crop and fiber. They classify as any form of waste material during agriculture practice, include chemical, pesticides, fertilization, and unused crop, along when not available parts of plant. It includes components of plant that are not used as a food. Okay. Secondly, I want to explain about nutritional content of watermelon. Watermelon is a major crop that is cultivated in the world warm region. Watermelon is largest fruit and basket of tropical fruit when oversized. Third, I want to explain about dietary fiber. The fiber consist of the ingestible section or compounds of plant that move through on stomach and intestines relatively unchanged. Fiber is a primary of carbohydrate that can help to maintain a balanced digestion system and help avoid constipation. There are two forms of fiber, which is solvent fiber and insoluble fiber. Lastly, I want to explain about bread. Bread is attributable to it contributes to a well-balanced diet. The characteristics of bread are large volume, smooth, rounded top, the surface is golden brown, the texture is fine and unfound, the crumb is thin and elastic, and the basic recipe of bread, which is wheat flour, is rich in gluten. Yeast is a part of bread making process. Fat is to increase nutrient value of bread. Salt is to help produce bread when fine texture and grains. Water is a balance when flour to create a sticky and elastic dough. Sugar is to help to improve the crumb color, and lastly, egg is to provide color and volume. For the methodology, there are some points can be explained, which is preparation of watermelon ring powder, process of bread, bread formulation, determine volume of bread, determine moisture of bread, measure fiber of bread, determine fat of bread, determine of age of bread, and lastly, texture properties of bread. Produce of watermelon ring powder. We separate the flesh and green skin part of watermelon and then cut into the small pieces, wash when tap water, and then we use dry oven to dry the small pieces and cooling and milling, and then keep into air-tight container to be analysis. For the process making bread, we whip the ingredient and then we mix the ingredient into the bowl, cleaning, fermentation the dough, after that crushing, skilling, molding, founding, and then breaking into the oven. After that, cooling and bread we produce. For the bread formulation, we have 5 samples we produce. For the positive control, we use 250 grams of wheat flour. For the negative control bread, we use 215 grams of wheat flour. For the formulation 1, we use 25 grams watermelon ring powder and 225 grams of wheat flour. For the formulation 2, we use 15 grams of watermelon ring powder and 200 grams of wheat flour. And lastly, for the formulation 3, we use 75 grams of watermelon ring powder and 175 grams of wheat flour. For the determination of volume of bread, the bread loaf volume is determined when red seed displacement method, and the specific volume of loaf bread is calculated by divide volume by weight. For the moisture content of bread, we use 1 gram of dough for 50 hours and 1 gram sample of bread for 4 hours at 130 Celsius to duplicate and put into the oven. For the measurement of fiber content, we use 1 gram sample to extract using dryer actor. The fat content of bread, we use the sample, we weigh into the timber and fat-free cotton wool to fitting loop into the top of the chamber when the material insert into the solvent device bottom extractor. For determine of hash content of bread, we use 1 gram sample and weigh into the hashing, which has been preheated cooling in a desalinator and weighed soon after room temperature. For the texture properties of bread, we use texture analysis fitting when a loading cell is used to perform the texture analysis test. For the lastly method, we send 5 samples to be analysis, which is positive control bread, negative control bread, and we have 3 formulations of watermelon rind powder bread at Institute of Halal Research and Measurement. That's all for me. Thank you.
Alright, now the proximate analysis. This is the overall view of the proximate analysis result, where formulation 1, 2, 3 and positive control and negative control has been analyzed for several characteristics such as crude fiber, crude fat, protein, moisture content, volume and the texture, where the texture refers to the hardness of the bread. The physical characteristic of bread also has been analyzed, the appearance of the bread. Almost all of the bread has similar characteristic, where the crust color is a dark brown crust color and it has a hard crust texture for all kind of control breads and formulation breads enriched with the watermelon rind powder. Now volume of the bread. This is the chart representing the result of the volume of the bread. We can see that the negative control has the highest volume of the bread and there is a decreasing trend in the in the volume of the bread as the amount of watermelon rind increases. So from here we can know that the negative control has a value of 419, standard deviation 43.8406, positive control 415.5, standard deviation 21.9203. Formulation 1 328.5, positive plus minus 77.7782. Formulation 2 as 291.5, standard deviation of 0.7071. Formulation 3 as 211 plus minus 43.8406 as the standard deviation value. This is the texture of the bread graph, the analysis of the texture. From here we can know that the formulation 1 with the 10% of WRP, watermelon rind powder, WRP, as the highest hardness, where the formulation 3 with the 30% of WRP, watermelon rind powder, as the lowest hardness. Referring to the table, negative control as a 5.096, standard deviation of 0.7643, positive control 5.327, plus minus 0.1096, formulation 1 5.636, positive minus 0.1089, formulation 2 5.598, plus minus 0.3825, and formulation 3 4.748, plus minus 0.3825. This is the crude fat of the bread. According to the crude fat of bread analysis, formulation 2, where 20% of the watermelon powder has been used to substrate with the wet flour to make the formulation 2 bread, as a high recorded of fat where 0.0969, and the lowest fat of bread belongs to the formulation 1 bread, where it only has 10% of WRP, watermelon rind powder. So the negative control bread has the value of 0.0887, positive control 0.0948 of fiber of fat, formulation 1 0.0825 of fat, formulation 2 0.0969 of fat, and formulation 3 0.0921 of fat. Now the protein content of the bread. Almost all of the bread has the nearest protein value, where the highest protein value is achieved by the positive control bread, which is made up of fully wholemeal flour. Comparing to the control and formulation breads have a lower protein compared to the both positive and negative control bread. So the negative control bread has a protein of 9.1914, positive control 10.363598, formulation 1 8.5543, formulation 2 8.6817 of protein, and lastly the formulation 3 8.8561 of protein content in the bread. See the moisture content of the bread. So, comparing the moisture content of the bread, the formulation 2 with 20% of WRP, the watermelon rind powder, as stated, our highest moisture content of the bread were 14.01, followed by the positive control 13.95, then formulation 3 13.74, then formulation 1 13.54, and the lastly negative control 13.07. From here we can conclude that the negative control has the least moisture content of the bread, where the comparing to the control breads with the treatment breads, formulation the treatment bread, which is formulation 2, has the highest moisture content compared to the control breads, both the negative and positive bread.
Good day to the respected panels. My name is Guguneshwaran Danapalan, and today I'll be talking about the discussion, conclusion and future directions parts. The first slide is about the discussion on crude fiber. The increasing amount of crude fiber is directly proportional with the amount of WRP used in each formulation. Each formulation's crude fiber is significantly different at each levels. It could be seen that as the levels of the watermelon rind powder increased in pan bread formula, the caloric value was decreased. These results may be due to a gradual reduction of carbohydrates as the results of replacement of watermelon rind powder and also increasing the fiber contents. According to all the data obtained, it clearly shows that the fiber content of the bread was enhanced with the addition of watermelon rind powder WRP. The percentage of WRP added to the bread influences the amount of fiber content enhanced in the bread. The more the WRP added to the bread, the amount of fiber content in the bread increases. Moving on to the crude fat slide. There is no significant difference in all crude fat amount from each bread. Formulation 1 shows 0.0825%, formulation 2 shows 0.0969%, whereas formulation 3 shows 0.0921%. Only formulation 2 shows the highest fat content, whereas formulation 1 and 3 shows lower fat percentage of fat content. According to the data obtained from the statistical analysis, there is no significant difference in the result for crude fat. Fats are used in bread making to improve gas retention in the dough and thereby increases its volume and softness to lubricate, to aerate and to help transfer the dough, imparting a desirable texture. From the result obtained, it shows that the incorporation of watermelon rind powder WRP does not affect the fat content of the bread, and the fat content in the bread solely depends on the fat ingredient used, like the shortening. Now moving on to the crude protein slide. The highest protein amount is shown from the control positive, followed by the control negative, and lastly by the bread incorporated with watermelon rind powder WRP. The main ingredient that contribute to protein source is the flour. Proteins in flour provide structure to the bread. Flour is also known as a protein source in the bread. Flour's two different types of protein gives bread its structure, which is glutenin that creates elasticity and then chewiness, and gliadin which creates extensibility, then the protein's ability to stretch to achieve a higher rise. These proteins need water in order to connect and form gluten, the supporting structure of the bread. With only WRP, the dough cannot be formed as it needs to be incorporated with wheat flour and eggs to provide bread structure. Moving on to the moisture content slide. Based on the statistical analysis obtained, there is no significant difference between positive and negative controls and the three formulations of bread for moisture content. Bread is generally a perishable product with a shelf life that is limited by the physiochemical deterioration known as staling, which leads to hardening and a dry texture connected with losing the moisture of the bread. The study found that the addition of dietary fiber tremendously improved the shelf life of the bread. It can be said that more the moisture content of the bread, less the shelf life of the bread, because the bread can be easily spoiled by mold. Moving on to the last slide of the discussion part, which is texture. Based on figure 4.5, formulation 1 had the highest hardness value when compared with controls and formulations, and this means in general the bread is softer and it has the least percentage of watermelon rind powder, WRP of 10% in it. Formulation 3 got the least hardness value out of all the formulations and controls, and it also had the most amount of WRP of 30%. This shows that the formulation 3 bread could be slightly harder and firmer than the other formulations and controls. When compared with controls and formulations using statistical analysis, it shows no significant difference. The dietary fiber in dietary products has been known to alter their texture and consistency. Dietary fiber can modify the firmness and also the springiness of the bread, but these modifications are mainly affected by the fiber source. The previous study can be related to the addition of WRP flour into bread can make the bread more denser, and the results obtained also shows the same. Conversely, other studies have taken note of the fact that the dietary fiber can result in improved texture. Both decreased firmness and decreased volume are affected by the content of dietary fiber in the used bread. The next slide is the conclusion. It is concluded that the more the watermelon rind powder composition, the more denser the bread will look like. To conclude, the production of watermelon rind powder enriched bread had a good potential to reduce agro waste and to be a better functional food product. Now, moving on to the last slide, which is the future direction. The future of fiber enriched breads from watermelon rind powder as a functional food shows great potential. Extraction method can be used in the future to extract watermelon rind and incorporate it into the bread to obtain better results, because normal dried watermelon rind powder had influenced the physiochemical properties of the bread, like the color of the bread and the crumb. A watermelon rind powder bread with a better shelf life will be researched in the future to improve the quality of the bread. A sourdough bread incorporated with watermelon rind powder will be implemented in the future, as it is a gluten-free bread combined with the fiber-enriched watermelon rind powder that could enhance the bread's goodness. That could lead the people who consumes it to a gluten-free diet. This could also solve the problem of people with gluten intolerance who cannot eat gluten-based foods. Now that is all from me. Thank you very much.